There are so many good people in the United States of America, good people in the world. I remember the first time I decided to make a video and I wanted to expose that Seth Rich had been, what appeared to me, had been murdered for political reasons. And I thought it was obvious. And I said, okay, well, no one's just put all the evidence together, put it in a video, and said, here it is. And of course, when I did that, it was a massive success, and I wound up making an 8-part documentary on Seth Rich, and I made documentaries on the history of the hijacked education system, on the CIA, on Operation Mockingbird, and so many interesting topics. The murder or accidental death of reporter Michael Hastings, and I had tremendous success with them, and so many passionate people along the way started to follow me, and it's nice to see, and it's uplifting, it's inspiring to see that there are more people out there who want the world to be better. But the longer you do something like I've done, where you try to spread truth on the internet, especially in the realm of politics, you realize just how powerful the forces that are trying to prevent liberty from spreading truly are. And then you realize that there is only a certain percentage of the population. It feels like it's everyone, but it's not. If you look, as many people, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it's more people don't vote than do vote in presidential elections, let alone actually pay attention to what's going on. So you get a very small percentage of people who are paying attention to what's going on. And within that small percentage of people who want to know what's going on in the world, many of them are completely mind controlled, completely lost. They have been coached their entire lives to outsource their thinking to authority. And of course, what does authority tell them? They go through the school system, and you're told, at least my generation, you're told white people are bad. Now, imagine how psychologically damaging that is to a young person who's white. You want to talk about racism in the modern world, just look at it from the perspective of white people and black people. You have, and if you just think of it in my age range, you have an entire generation of young white people that have been told the worst thing they could ever be in this world is racist. And then you have an entire generation of young black people, actually going back generations, back to a time where there was probably some truth to it, but not anymore. And you have an entire generation of black people who are told that white people are racist and white people are evil and white people are the reason for your problems. Well, what is the natural result of that going to be? Of course, it's going to be the paradox we see in the modern world. The media will tell you that whites are so racist and that minorities are benevolent and they can do no wrong, where the truth is, and it's just obvious if you go on social media, if you are plugged into this and you look outside of the mainstream, the truth is there is by far more anti-white racism in the world than there is racism coming from white people against other people. What do you expect? You have a generation of people who are told being racist is the worst thing you can be as children. And that's a good message. I think that's a very positive message. But then you have minorities and an entire generation of people who are told white people are bad. Well, of course, the natural result of that is going to be a lot of anti-white racism, to the point where people are truly racist, they can't even see it. And it is quite a paradigm. By the way, this isn't where I thought this talk was going to go, but not what I planned on saying, but I like it. Compare that to, 75 years ago, 80 years ago, where the media and the corporate elites told young white people that black people were bad, and they told that young black people that white people were good. Well, again, the result at that time in history was you had more racist white people and less racist black people. And all that's happened is the roles have switched, because skin color, when they say history repeats itself, it's not that a skin color repeats itself. Human psychology repeats itself. Human greed and pursuit of power repeats itself. So, what you get is the oligarchy, whichever race of people they have to demonize or promote hatred against in order to gain power, that's what they're going to do. And in the modern world, there's demographics that are changing, and white people pay 80% of the taxes in the United States of America, so they're the tax cattle. So in the modern world, you get a lot of mainstream media, cultural pushed anti-white racism, and that's what we see happening in the world. And that's why you could pretty much say anything about white people, but if you say something like obvious, like, if the media reports on this talk, they would say that, oh, look at this racist white guy. Well, I mean, what am I saying? That all I've said is that all racism is bad, and a basic observation about the way young people are raised. But what got me into that train of thought was coming from the spot where I was talking about the small percentage of people who actually focus on politics. So, I mean, these people, they've been conditioned by society through the education system, listen to authority, and because of that, their teachers have pushed certain messages. The example I gave, of course, white people are bad, they're the cause of all the problems in the world, and listen to authority, and then they go to college, and the messaging gets even more intense, and they get out of college and they read the New York Times and they watch CNN and the mainstream media, and it's relentless propaganda pushing a very specific message, whatever message that is that the oligarchy in power wants people to believe. It's funny, you see groups of people who push back against taxation, for example, and they think, oh, we need to make the rich pay their fair share in taxes. And then they read the New York Times, or they turn on CNN, and these networks say that they're for the people, and that, yes, of course, the rich aren't paying their fair share in taxes, and they get people all fired up that the taxes need to be risen. But what these people don't realize is that the way an oligarchy works is the rich people, the truly rich people who are being demonized by CNN and the New York Times, they are the oligarchy. They are those rich people. And it's something as simple as, you want to raise taxes on the rich, right? You always hear that. And it sounds really good. We're going to make them pay. But it's not about tax rates. It's about loopholes. Rich people, truly rich, I'm talking about. Truly rich. Like billions and billions of dollars. And that's when they talk about the wealth gap, that's what they're talking about. So truly rich people, they are able to hide their money overseas. They're able to exploit tax loopholes, many tax loopholes, which, oh, by the way, I'm not going to get into it here, but I could explain what they do. You could figure this out as people. It's not the hardest thing in the world to figure out. But they exploit these loopholes, and smaller operations can't. So then you get middle class businesses like mom and pop shops, you know, making, maybe they bring in $10 million a year, $15 million a year. Sounds like they're super rich, but they have employees and whatnot. And they're doing well, and they're able to employ people, and they're good for the economy. They're good for people of all colors and creeds, and their tax rate goes up, and then they can't compete with like Amazon.com, and they go out of business, and the big mega corporations get monopolies, and that's how this stuff really works. That's why the media pushes for these big government policies, because it's corporate government partnerships. But people are so controlled through their upbringing, through their culture, because it's not just the academic system. It's not just the mainstream media for the people that are politically plugged in. Because of that percentage of the people that are actually politically aware, like I said, many of them have been brainwashed through the academic system, through the media. So even though they're politically plugged in, they are actually, in the Soviet Union, they would be called useful idiots of the government. This is what Stalin called them. He called them useful idiots. It's not like it was the small government opponents who were calling. I mean, yeah, they took up the phrase, like, yeah, these people are useful idiots, but it was their own government who would call them that, because they're fighting against their own interest for the oligarchy, but they've been convinced that they're fighting against the oligarchy and for their own interests. So of those politically active people, you get a smaller percentage that who think they're opposed to that message, but they actually support controlled opposition, and the controlled opposition isn't going to do anything substantial. It's two sides of the same coin. Like, these are the people you see, oh yeah, well, we're voting Republican. Well, the Republicans are just Democrat lights. The same oligarchy that controls the Democrats on one side of the coin controls those same Republicans. You know, George Soros is, John McCain recently died, and people are, he was controversial because there has been a split against the establishment to some degree in the last 2 years. I mean, yeah, John McCain was taking money from George Soros. John Kasich takes money from George Soros. Why do you think he'll be running for president again, or at least he's exploring that avenue? What do you think Mitt Romney is? What do you think all these people are? And why do you think people, like Ben Shapiro get pushed by the mainstream media? Because these are controlled opposition to make people think that they're fighting against the establishment when they're really not. And then there's a smaller group of people that are politically awake, that understand that there's two sides to one coin, and there are very few people who are actually fighting for true liberty and limited government. And there might be disagreements amongst these people, but they get the basics, that the government always lies us into wars, that the financial system it's not real. They print money out of nothing. It's fake. These people believe they're gods on earth. They don't back the money with anything. It's just, they just print it the same way you have a printer in your house. They just throw little dollar signs on Microsoft Word, basically, print that out and say, here you go, and all of society just eats it up. And then we agree to pay them back interest. Why did they have the right to this money? To make it? Why are they gods on earth? But it doesn't just stop there, because that's just the politically awake part of society. And that's just touching the surface. Because then you get past the politically awake part of society, and you get to the real sleeping masses. People that aren't involved, don't even think about politics at all, yet they get these people to come out in droves and push for governmental policies that serve the oligarchy and are against their direct interest. And this is where the true power, this is why you get like Puff Daddy, if you remember the Vote or Die campaign. This is why you have them constantly talking about, yeah, we need to lower the voting age. 18, no, it should be 16. Because the younger a person is, the less likely they are to have any idea how the world works or to be politically aware. So you say, oh, but yeah, how do they know they can control the minds of these people? What if they vote against the interests of the oligarchy, if there is such a thing as voting against the interests of the oligarchy? And the answer to that is culture. You always hear, I've said it many times, and it's true, that politics is downstream from culture. And people don't understand the true power of that. That if power, and it is, this is why they go to such great lengths to control the minds of the masses. If power is controlling the minds of the masses, because you control the minds of the masses, they vote for you, they vote to give you more power, they vote to give you more wealth, and obviously if they are stuck in a hamster wheel or completely unaware of what's going on in the world, they're not going to rebel against you and hang you in the streets. So power is control of the masses, control of the minds of the minds of the masses. Then culture is how you do it. And they want people to vote who aren't paying attention because they control them through culture. Culture is mind control. And yes, it's the education system as we have spoken about, but then you get everything that is entertainment. And be very wary of people on YouTube, by the way, because they have figured out that they had to, there were too many independent creators on YouTube and on the internet, so now they have their own establishment propped up people who are made to appear to be grassroots, and they're not. But it's Hollywood, right? It's everything you get. It's the movie industry. Why do Americans and people all over the world support endless wars? Well, when Hollywood rolls out all those tanks and everything and all the explosions, well, the Pentagon agrees to give them that equipment, and that comes with a price. Of course, that's to make sure they push patriotic war propaganda, right? Patriotism is to support your government's wars. Well, you wake up and understand our history and what the world really is. You understand that patriotism is questioning of government. Patriotism is opposition to government. It's just the opposite of what we're told. But we don't understand our history because, one, we could keep going back to the education system and the media, but two, because history is distorted through Hollywood, and the people that serve the governmental narrative of the establishment, people in power, they'll be propped up. I mean, you look at a great example of someone who is propped up historically, that is a terrible person. Nelson Mandela. You say, oh my God, and people that are sleeping, how can you say that? Nelson Mandela, I mean, he oversaw the murdering of not white people. He oversaw the murdering of young black children. Winnie Mandela, his wife, put a tire around, I believe, a 9-year-old boy's neck and doused it in oil and lit the tire on fire and watched the boy's head, a little boy. These are horrible human beings, but they serve a narrative of, and you wake up to these things and you realize it's all narrative. They serve a narrative being pushed by people who are an oligarchy pursuing power. And Hollywood is greatly controlled in this way, and of course it's the television shows, it's the late night comedy shows. I mean, even if you're not politically awake, you have to see that the comedy shows are just relentless propaganda. I mean, if Trump is the target, for example, and I don't want to make this about him, but if he is the target, just look at the positive versus the negative coverage of one person by the late night comedy shows. I mean, if you're a comedian, you're supposed to make fun of all things in culture, not be overtly political, but the whole culture is controlled. Everything that people see, whether it's Hollywood movies, whether it's late night stand-ups, whether it's television shows. I mean, even Grey's Anatomy during when the Affordable Health Care Act was coming out. That's documented. You could Google it. There was Democratic Party operatives had paid them to push propaganda on Grey's Anatomy, and of course it's brilliant. But politics truly are downstream from culture, and Hollywood and all of these institutions do a great job of creating a false reality that supports the political agenda and the narratives of whatever the oligarchy who rule over us, and we are all slaves. Don't make a mistake about it. In fact, I'm going to shoot a video. I was thinking about, I got upset the other night. I do a lot. I get depressed. And by the way, I'm not suicidal and I will never kill myself, so if that happens. But depressed that I'm aware that I'm a slave. And most people in society are not. Even the politically, you think they're awake. You start to understand the world enough. Understand we are slaves. We are cattle. We are sheep being led to the slaughter for wolves, and they are targeting our families, and they are hurting our children. But they do this. They do this through culture. And just the other night, I mean, there's the Golden Globe Awards, right? And I mean, look, I mean, Caitlyn Jenner was the Woman of the Year. I mean, even if you buy into that the whole trans narrative and everything around it, I mean, the Woman of the Year, the Woman of the Year, she, if we're gonna call her that, had, and I would call Bruce, Caitlyn, and her to be respectful if I met him, a respectful person, but she was announced she was a woman 9 months earlier. Okay. And in that same 9-month period, committed vehicular manslaughter and murdered someone. But none of that matters because it fit a narrative, so they put her up in front of the world, and he is the Woman of the Year, and anyone who goes against that is labeled hateful and racist, and of course the conditioning. And these are all just trigger words. The words are used to control us. It's just another method. The words that we're taught, these words, certain words are hateful, certain words are bad, right? You can't say those words. You have to be politically correct. Well, politically correct, it's all about controlling the minds of people, right? We're social animals. We don't want to be called racist. We don't want to be called anything of the sort. So people will self-censor even if their instincts are against what's being pushed on them. Just the other day, they had the Golden Globe Awards. And at the Golden Globes, one of the things in the middle of the Golden Globe Awards, and I read about it. I didn't watch it because it's mind-draining nonsense. But they were pushing a vaccine narrative. And one of the ways, again, people are social animals. They don't want to be viewed. This is why they use terms like conspiracy theorist. Again, it's what is a conspiracy theorist? Someone who doesn't listen to authority at face value and actually likes to look at the evidence for themselves. Why is that bad? But because people are conditioned to that. So they use mockery, because we're social animals, to make people not question things because they don't want to be mocked. They don't want to be viewed as an outsider to the herd. It's part of our evolution. We're social. So they say, we're going to give flu shots right here on live television for the whole world to see. And they literally take out syringes and start giving people flu shots on live television at this glorified show with all of the famous actors and actresses and all of these beautiful people who you should aspire to be. And they say, if you're an anti-vaxxer, you just put a napkin on your head. And the crowd, everyone laughs, ha 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 ha, because they want you to feel ashamed if you think differently, if you think for yourself. And I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to tell you that you should certainly research the issue. You should certainly watch the documentary on YouTube titled The Truth About Vaccines Episode 1 if you haven't, especially if you're having young children, and you're cheating yourself. But it's all designed to create mockery. Never mind that the whole Me Too situation, and not before they hijack the narrative, because if you dig deep into it, you see that it's not what they say it is. It's not about men and women. It's about a power structure. It's about, in order to move up the ranks in Hollywood, you have to have a level of immorality that most of us can't even fathom. And that's why R. Kelly got caught, then they throw him under the bus, right? But before he gets caught, he's protected. And Kevin Spacey is a pedophile, and he's protected. And, of course, what's his name? Corey Feldman has been on record for years that he was a victim of pedophilia, and that there is massive pedophilia in Hollywood, not just young girls, young boys, because if you want to move up the ranks of Hollywood and you want to accumulate power, then you have to show them that you're willing to keep a secret. And of course they have to have something over you so that if anyone's secret is exposed, it's mutually assured destruction. It's like, hey, you could expose me, but I'll destroy you. And then of course you're dealing with people that are the most morally depraved people in society, and you really don't want, this is the true mafia. I mean, the only difference between the government and the mafia is the government has a 15-year education program convincing you that they're looking out for you. And again, you have to understand it's an oligarchy. Who do you think the government is? What do you think? They don't control the media? What do you think? They don't control Hollywood? That's who these people are. They control the banks. They control the big corporations and the tax-exempt foundations. They control the government. They control the Democrats. They control the Republicans. They control Hollywood. They control the Golden Globes and the Oscars and the late-night comedians. And they do it through their disgusting networks of pedophilia and blackmail and money and grants and anything that people are willing to sell their soul for. So you understand that this is the world we live in. And this has been an emotional roller coaster for me over the last 18 months because you realize what you're up against. And I've drawn one conclusion, that there are so many good people and they're out there and they're fighting this very, very admirable fight. And they're out there and they're putting all their sweat and energy in, and they're on the internet and they're sharing videos, and all that's great. Share this video. I appreciate it and everything like it. But the only way we can make change. See, people say, well, don't do national politics. Focus on local politics. It's the focus on politics isn't how you make the change. The power of these elites that control our society is through the culture. It's not through the politics. The politics are the symptom of the disease, and the disease is what they've done to our culture. If the United States of America is our body, then the disease that inflicts our body is the erosion of our culture, which is the erosion of our principles and our values. And then if the disease gets bad enough and it starts to spread, we'll start cutting off our nose to spite our own face. We'll cut off our own arm. We'll cut off our own leg. And that's our politics. Culture is the disease. So if you really want to make change, you have to start, if you want the world to be better, you have to start in your home. You have to start with yourself. Stop being politically correct, because every time you make a decision to be politically correct, then you are kneeling and you're accepting that your culture has been eroded, destroyed, that it's not worth defending. Stop putting off having families. Your culture tells you that you shouldn't have a family, that you should get drunk into your 30s, especially for a young woman that, of course, you have a biological clock and these things are real. Stop doing that and find good people that want to have families and get married at a young age and have lots of children. And don't send your children to be victimized by an education program that you know is designed to destroy their minds. But, it's hard. It's hard to do something else. And, of course, you might be viewed as an outcast if you take another route. You see how it's controlling you? Culture is controlling you. It's everywhere around you. Don't send your children to a public school. If you have to send them to a school, find a good private school that has your sense of morality, your principles, and send them there. But if you really want to do it right, then you homeschool them. And be an example and find ways to share your culture. And if you believe in God, talk about your belief in God. And if you have a sense of morality and principles, talk about your morality and principles. Because if you want to change culture, if you want to change the politics of a nation, then you have to win back the culture. Because until you do that, you're going to lose. So talk about history and make your own YouTube channel, but don't just think to make change you focus on politics. Just be cool and make your own show, and in that show just demonstrate the same way they do with propaganda. Make shows with families that have religious values that are interesting. Because there is no limit to the human creative spirit. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you through my own lens, through the way I analyze society, I could break it down philosophically and tell you why we are losing. Why and we are losing. And people will think, oh, they're winning, they're winning. You are all losing. We are all losing. We are slaves. If you want to change the world, you have to start with yourself, you have to start with your family, and you have to focus on not the politics, but the culture at the grassroots level. Please share this link. You can support me on Patreon for as little as $1 monthly. www.patreon.com/ffrnews. Sorry I have to use them. They suck, but they do have a monopoly. Don't cut my nose to spite my face. And as always, power to the individual. And long live liberty.